It's December 5th, 1945. 5 Navy bombers and a training run over the Bahamas. Pilots who have done this run before. Nothing about this flight looks dangerous. 2 hours in, flight instructor Charles Taylor picks up his radio. He says something that shouldn't be possible for a man who knows these waters. His compasses are broken. Not one, both. He doesn't know which way is home. For 3 hours, the tower at Fort Lauderdale listens. 5 planes arguing over which way is which. The radio signal gets weaker every minute. A rescue plane is dispatched to find them. It disappears too. No distress call. Nothing. A week later, the search stops. Ships, planes, hundreds of them, covering thousands of miles of ocean. 27 men, 6 aircraft, vanished. No wreckage, no oil on the water, no bodies. Just a Navy report that reads like science fiction, as if they'd vanished into thin air. Now, Taylor wasn't new to flying. He'd fought in the Pacific during the war, and after that he taught other pilots how to navigate. First out of Key West, then out of Miami. 2 different stretches of ocean, but full of islands. That afternoon he called in his flight number. He didn't use his real call sign for Fort Lauderdale. He used the one for Miami instead. A small mistake. Easy to miss. But it does tell you something. Part of his brain was still flying over the wrong islands. Different water, different islands. Somewhere over the Bahamas, Taylor got worried. He thought they drifted off course, so he took over. Pushed the student pilot who had been leading them aside. "I'm sure I'm in the Keys," he told the tower. The weather got worse and the light failed. By the last radio call, the crews weren't talking about getting home anymore. They were talking about how to land on the water together, so that whoever survived as a group. None of this made the news in 1945, but it didn't disappear either. 5 years later, a newspaper story ran across America. It counted up 5 separate disappearances from that exact stretch of ocean. 1 boat, 9 planes, and about 135 people, all vanishing without explanation. The reporter didn't guess at cause. The story just ended on a question, daring somebody to answer it. And someone did. 14 years after that, a magazine writer named Vincent Gaddis wrote a piece for a magazine called Argosy. Argosy wasn't in the business of solving mysteries. It was in the business of selling them. Gaddis took the same old cases. He added Flight 19 on top. Drew 3 lines over the map, Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. He called whatever sat inside that shape Bermuda Triangle. He never said why those 3 points. They weren't currents and it wasn't shipping lanes, certainly not storms. No math behind it apparently. Just a triangle, a headline, a deadline, and it's stuck. Within 10 years, most people saying the phrase had no idea who made it up, or that the shape was ever anything more than 3 lines drawn to make a already strange story feel a little stranger. Which leaves a problem. Argosy sold fiction, made up stories dressed as fact, for readers who wanted a thrill, not an answer. September 13th, 1492. Christopher Columbus is 10 days into a crossing no European has ever finished. His ship's log records something wrong. The compass needle is drifting, a little to the northwest at night, more by morning. His officers notice it too. Nobody can explain it, as far as anyone in 1492 knows. Compasses do not do this. 4 days later, the sea rises. No wind to really explain it. 2 nights after that, a lookout sees a light on the horizon. Low, small, rising and falling on the water like a candle. Columbus takes it as a sign of land. He doesn't write that it scared him. A few hours later, somebody spots the coast. That's it. That's the whole founding story of the Bermuda Triangle. A broken compass, a strange sea, and a light that turned out to mean exactly what Columbus thought it meant. It happened almost 500 years before anybody drew a triangle on a map. So if this whole myth was engineered in a magazine office in 1964, why does Chapter 1 belong to a man who died in 1506? Nobody's answered that yet. Not really, and the next case only makes the timeline worse. It's January 1921. A 5-masted ship called the Carroll A passes by a lightship off North Carolina, 3 weeks out from Barbados. All 11 crew are still aboard, as far as anyone can tell. A red-headed man leans over the rail with a megaphone. He has a heavy accent. He shouts across the water. They've lost both anchors. Nothing else seems to be wrong. The ship sails on, north towards Norfolk. But she never gets there. 2 days later, the Coast Guard find her run aground on the Diamond Shoals. Her sails are still up, like someone meant to keep sailing. A cargo of sugar still in her holds, and 0 souls aboard. When the Coast Guard finally climb aboard, the ship's logs are gone, and the steering wheel, along with other equipment, seems to have been smashed apart. 11 men are never found. Not then, not ever. Months later, funnily enough, a man by the name of Christopher Columbus Gray finds a bottle near the wreck. Inside a note, it says, "The Deering was boarded, captured by an oil-burning ship, something like a chaser." For a while, people believe it. They believe it enough that the US State Department put out its own statement. There is every suspicion of foul play here. Then the handwriting experts prove Gray wrote the note himself. It was a hoax. Case closed. Well, maybe not. Because Gray stumbled onto something true by accident. The real evidence points somewhere else. Before they left Barbados, the captain and the first mate had already fallen out. Badly. Bad enough that the first mate swore in public that he would get the captain before the trip was over. The captain bailed him out and forgave him on the spot, which means one thing. The one man on the ship with an actual reason to want the captain gone was standing on deck, still angry. Still angry when she sailed into whatever happened next. That's motive, opportunity, a grudge with a paper trail. Except it doesn't explain the second ship. Right after the Deering passed the lightship, another ship appeared behind her. A big black steamer, no name. Someone on deck covered up its own nameplate, and then it sped off into the dark. Mutiny explains the captain. It never explains the ship that followed her. It's March 1918, the USS Cyclops. 542 feet long, over 300 men aboard. A working radio, she leaves Barbados for Baltimore. She's never seen again. No SOS, no wreckage. Not one piece of debris for search ships to even argue over. President Woodrow Wilson gets asked what happened. His answer is still more or less the official one. Only God and the gods of the sea know what happened to that great ship. The obvious wartime theory is it's a German submarine. It's 1918 and U-boats are out there, but records checked after the war from both sides show no submarine anywhere near her route that week. Which leaves the captain. Lieutenant Commander George Worley ran a tight and angry ship. His own crew called him the damned Dutchman behind his back because of his accent. Except Worley wasn't actually Dutch. And Worley wasn't even really Worley. He was born in Germany. His real name was Johann Weishmann. As a teenager, he jumped off a German ship in San Francisco. He took a dead friend's name. He built a whole new life in the American merchant service. Naval intelligence only found out after the ship was already gone. They spent months building a case against a man who couldn't answer a single question. By then, there was nobody left to ask. Here's the part that should bother you more than the fake name. The one officer on board who actually knew how to load manganese ore properly had been locked in his quarters. He was locked in there right before the ship loaded up and sailed into the silence that swallowed her. Now, manganese ore is heavy, it's unstable, and it shifts if you stack it wrong. A captain hiding his own name for 40 years, a crew that hated him, and the one man who knew how to load the ship safely was locked in a room while it was loaded wrong. Put those three facts side by side. See how comfortable you feel with the word accident. Maybe it's just bad luck stacked on worse luck. An inexperienced crew. Cargo loaded wrong. A ship that rolled and went too fast for anybody to reach. That's the leading theory today, but it didn't stop two of her sister ships from vanishing on almost exactly the same route 23 years later. In 1941, it was a different war, different captains. Same total silence though. Every case so far is paper, logbooks, radio transcripts, old investigation files that historians can pick apart from a safe distance. Gernon isn't paper, he's a licensed pilot. As of this recording, he is still alive, still giving interviews, still telling the story of December 4th, 1970, almost exactly the way he has for more than 50 years. He was flying a small plane from the Bahamas to Florida that afternoon. His father was in the seat beside him. A cloud off to one side started growing. Faster than clouds are supposed to grow. It spread, thickened, closed in around him. His compass spun with no direction. Gernon found himself in something that felt less like a storm and more like a tunnel. Strange flashes of light that came from inside the cloud. For what he says, felt like half an hour. No working instruments, no sense of up or down, let alone which way was home. Then the tunnel opened up, and all of a sudden, he was over Miami. Just like that, a flight that should have taken 90 minutes had taken 47. Do the math, that's not fast flying. That's missing time. Scientists have offered explanations since. Rare cloud shapes, time feeling distorted under real fear. But every other case in this story is a dead man's file. This one isn't. Gernon isn't a file you can quietly close. He is a man who is still alive, still telling the same story to the cameras, 50 years later. By 1974, all of it had an explanation. Flight 19, the Daring, the Cyclops. Dozens of smaller cases too. It came from a former intelligence officer turned author named Charles Berlitz. Now, Berlitz was not your typical Pulp Fiction hustler. When you look at his background, the immediate question isn't how he wrote the book, it's why he bothered. Berlitz was a Yale graduate. He spent 13 years in military intelligence. He was the grandson of a man who founded the Berlitz language schools, an empire that made his family staggeringly wealthy. He didn't need the money. He didn't need the fame. And in the intelligence community, the mission is to look for patterns, to aggregate data, to separate signal from noise. You do not torch your credibility by inventing fairy tales for a royalty check that you don't even need. Berlitz wrote the book because he believed the data pointed to something real, something anomalous. He applied his tactical, intelligence-driven mindset to a maritime mystery, and he followed the data wherever it led, even if it led to underwater anomalies and doorways to other dimensions. But the pushback was swift, and it came from a man who had everything to gain. Enter Lawrence David Kusche, the landlocked Arizona reference librarian. If Berlitz didn't need the money, what about the man who made his name tearing him down? Kusche's 1975 book, The Bermuda Triangle Mystery Solved, launched his entire career. It made him the go-to media darling for rationalism. There is a specific kind of ego required to look at hundreds of missing people, centuries of maritime history, and declare yourself the sole genius who figured it all out from a desk in the desert. Kusche became fiercely territorial of his title as the man who killed the triangle. Debunking is a business. You cannot sell 1 million copies of a book that says, "We still don't know." You sell copies by claiming you have the definitive answer. He was building his own brand, and to do it, he had to convince the whole world that everybody else was stupid. What Kusche and his followers pulled off over the next 4 decades is nothing short of academic gaslighting. Gaslighting relies on making the victim doubt their own reality. The debunkers did this on a global scale. They looked at the public, pointed at a 1940s weather report, and said, "There was a storm, and you were foolish for asking any more questions." But here is the tactical reality that Kusche's ego wouldn't let him admit. Finding a flaw in the paperwork does not locate the asset. In any intelligence or military briefing, if a 542-foot collier like the USS Cyclops goes missing, you don't just close the file because somebody found a clerical error in the weather log. You close the file when you find the hull. Kusche was right about one thing. There was sloppy research by authors who came before him, but his arrogance was assuming that proving a book wrong was the same as proving that the ocean was empty. He essentially told the world that because he found a storm in a meteorological archive, that we should all completely ignore the fact that not one single life jacket, oil slick, or piece of debris ever floated to the surface. The debunkers closed the book, patted themselves on the back, and walked away with their own book deals, leaving the exact same empty, silent water behind them. They asked the world to believe that the rough seas and the Gulf Stream were the only culprits. They claimed that the disappearance was just a tragic mix of violent storms and human error. It was a neat, very arrogant, and highly profitable theory. There was just one problem with it: the witchcraft. December 22nd, 1967. A Miami hotel owner named Dan Burak takes a friend out for the evening. Priest. Nothing ambitious, just a short run from the marina to buoy number 7. It's about a mile offshore, close enough to see the Christmas lights on the beach without even losing sight of the land. Calm water, clear skies. At 9 o'clock, Burak radios the Coast Guard. His voice, by every account, is steady, almost bored. He states they've hit something in the water. Nothing serious and no one's hurt. The boat isn't taking on water, but they just needed to tow back in. Just 2 friends, out to see some lights. The Coast Guard station is close by. A boat's on the water within minutes. It reaches Burak's last known position in 19. It finds nothing. Not the witchcraft, not Burak, not even Father Horgan. And no debris in the water. In water so calm and so shallow, searchers can see straight to the bottom in places. The boat had built-in flotation, specifically so that she could not sink. She still managed to vanish completely enough that a week of searching, more than 20,000 square miles of it, turned up absolutely nothing. There's a theory here too. It's no aliens required. Questions came up about whether Burak's money troubles were worse than his lifestyle let on. Whether faking a disappearance might have been easier to pull off in 1967 than it would be today. Nobody's ever proved it, and it doesn't explain why a Catholic priest would even go along with it, or why neither man was ever seen again, anywhere, under any name, for the rest of their lives. Word travelled fast through Miami. A hotel owner and a priest gone, in sight of shore they'd left less than an hour before. That's likely why part of the search moved as fast as it did. Fast boats, fast planes, good weather for looking. It didn't matter. Take the statistics from a minute ago and put them next to this one case. Watch how fast they stop feeling reassuring. A mile from lit shoreline, 19 minutes, calm water, gone. Maybe the strangest part of this whole story was never in the water at all. It's the shape itself. 3 lines drawn by a magazine writer on a deadline in 1964. No real data behind where those lines were drawn, and somehow that shape went on to swallow more than 70 incidents across 400 years. The Deering had already cleared the triangle by the time she wrecked. A 1954 disappearance near the Azores happened nowhere near it either. None of that mattered. Even the borders were never agreed on. Depending which book you trust, the triangle covers anywhere from 500,000 to 1.5 million square miles, which really just means nobody ever agreed to where the danger was supposed to stop. Once a shape has a name and a body count attached to it, people stop checking to whether new cases actually belong inside the lines. They just add them. That's not a mystery about the ocean. That's a mystery about us as humans. About how easily 3 lines drawn in a few idle minutes can outlive a man who drew them. Gaddis had been dead for years. The shape he drew is still in working, still collecting cases for a file that was never properly opened in the first place. So here is where the file actually sits. Start with the one case that actually closes. What Columbus saw in 1492 is called magnetic declination, the gap between magnetic north and true north. Now, this changes depending on where you stand on the Earth. Unknown science then, but somewhat routine now. The rising sea was probably just a current, and the light was exactly what Columbus guessed it was, a fire on land, lit by people who were already there. One case closed 470 years before anybody opened a file on it. That is the only one. Here is the detail the skeptics always dismiss. For a stretch of the early 1900s, the agonic line, the exact band where magnetic north and true north perfectly align, ran directly through this water. It has since drifted into the Gulf of Mexico, nowhere near the triangle today. The Cyclops vanished inside of that window, so did the Deering. Skeptics will tell you that the magnetic anomaly is just a navigation footnote. They say compasses do not sink ships, and they're right. A navigation error does not vaporize a 542-foot Navy vessel without leaving a single piece of debris. But what if the danger was not a confused pilot or a broken compass? What if the trigger was the magnetic alignment itself? A perfect 0 point in Earth's magnetic field. Columbus sailed through this exact same alignment only 4 centuries earlier, on the same stretch of water, when he saw the ocean mysteriously rise and a strange glowing light hover on the horizon. The agonic line drifts. It moves across the globe, but when it anchors itself over this specific stretch of ocean, things start to disappear. Nobody has ever explained Flight 19. There is not one bolt, not after 80 years. In water, the Navy had just spent 3 years successfully hunting submarines through. And nobody has explained the Witchcraft going missing completely, only 19 minutes from help, in water so calm you could see the bottom. Add those up. More than 340 people across 4 cases, spanning most of a century. Here is the part that should bother you though. Bodies don't just vanish. Decomposition builds up gases within days, and the gas makes bodies float, usually inside a week, but it is faster within warm water. And it happens whether anyone is looking or not. 340 people, warm water every time. Not one body, not one life jacket, not one hull, wing, bolt. A 542-foot Navy ship, a schooner, 5 aircraft, a cabin cruiser, gone completely. Not one piece has ever washed up, been dredged up, or turned up on a sonar sweep. I did find one anomaly in this investigation, one that is almost never discussed. What if the Bermuda Triangle is not always active? The data suggests it comes in waves. Quiet decades, then active ones. Go back through every case blamed on the triangle and you can map it. It builds through the 50s, the 60s, peaks in the mid-70s, and then it simply falls off a cliff. That wave is real, and the debunkers, they're going to tell you it's just a wave in pop culture, a publishing boom that faded out. But look at the evidence, look behind, or rather at the lack of it. Bruce Gernon's compass spinning in a tunnel of clouds, arriving in Miami with 47 minutes of missing time. Ships and planes leaving no oil slicks, no distress calls, and zero physical trace. If it was just bad weather and human error, the ocean would have given something back. The ocean always gives something back. And that brings us back to Charles Berlitz. He sold 20 million copies, pitching a theory that everyone laughed off as pure science fiction. A doorway to somewhere else. An anomaly that does not just sink ships, but also removes them from our physical space entirely. The wave of disappearances stopped in 1976. The doorway, if there ever was one, seems to have closed for now. But looking out over that water today, you have to wonder, what happens when it opens again? Thanks for joining me here today, and remember, they do rely on you forgetting, on you clicking away. Don't do it, go deeper down the rabbit hole with this next video. And to make sure the signal can find you again, join the network, click subscribe here, or visit our new website at Thinkavarium.com and sign up to ensure you always receive notifications about new episodes. This is Thinkavarium.